Hi, I'm Andy and welcome to the Running Channel. Today I'm going to be taking a closer look at this, Casio's new G-Shock GBD-H1000 smartwatch with GPS and heart rate function. But before we dive into that, if you're new to the Running Channel, please do hit subscribe and tap the bell icon to be notified when we upload new videos about running, which we do every week. Just before we get stuck in, I wanted to let you know that we've been sent this unit by Casio, but they haven't paid us and we're under no obligation to say nice things about their product. And in fact, everything you're about to hear are my genuine opinions and those of the Running Channel. So why should you care about the new Casio G-Shock watch? It's probably not a brand that you're familiar with from a pure running perspective, but it is definitely worth a look based on the specs alone. Firstly, of course, there's the G-Shock heritage. So part of Casio, they're their super rugged, ultra protective, basically bomb-proof watches. But until now, there hasn't been one that has a heart rate monitor included. So now that we have the total package, allegedly, that's a smartwatch that you can receive phone notifications on, a GPS tracker, and also a heart rate sensor, then it's definitely worth considering as to whether it could be something that could compete with the more established brands in the running space. Along with the G-Shock heritage comes the styling, which I think you either love or you hate. There's definitely a lot of G-Shock collectors out there, and this might be an item that they want to add to their collection. But the key for us today is to find out whether it's functionally worth using as a runner. One of the things that you guys ask us about a lot when it comes to watches is battery life, and ultimately that's important to me too. So one of the appealing features of this watch is the fact that it's solar powered. You can charge it through USB as well, but Casio claim that if you're only using it as a watch with smart notifications, then it'll last up to 12 months without charging it at all, just through exposure to sunlight and indoor fluorescent lighting. That's obviously appealing, but I also wanted to find out how that battery life fares when you're out for a run using both GPS and heart rate monitor. So let's take a look up close and talk you through all of the different elements of this watch. The watch comes in 4 different colorways. The white and black you see here, a black version, a red version, and a black and red version. We should also talk about the size. It's a big watch, 63mm across and over 20mm thick, weighing in at 101 grams. To give you a comparison, the Garmin Fenix 6, which is a fairly big watch, is 47mm across, 14mm thick, and 83 grams, so 20 grams less. There are 5 sensors: an optical heart rate sensor, a 3-axis accelerometer, a magnetic sensor to do the compass, a pressure sensor that does altitude and barometric pressure, and a thermosensor for temperature. And then in time mode, which is step counting plus notifications, Casio claim a 12-month battery life. Add in heart rate to that time mode and that reduces to 66 hours according to Casio. And then in training modes, you can either have continuous GPS and heart rate, which gives you around 14 hours, or you can increase that to around 18 hours if you move to intermittent GPS and heart rate. There are 5 different buttons. The bottom left toggles through the various different mode screens, starting with the home screen, which does show you your battery life. Next is heart rate, obviously not on my wrist at this point so you can't see it. Then onto the workout screen where you can set different lengths of intervals for different workouts. Moving on to the stopwatch, that's pretty straightforward. On the next screen you can toggle between compass, which is what it shows at first, and then using the top left hand button you can go straight to the altimeter to see your altitude, and then onto the barometer to see the pressure and temperature. Next up is your activity screen, which gives you at a glance how much exercise you've been doing. Then if you hit the dedicated run button on the left, you can access your activity log. That shows you all of your recent activities that are still stored on the watch, and you can click into each one to see more details. You can then also click in further to see a more detailed breakdown of the stats for that run. First up you see distance, total time, average pace, calories, cadence, amount of ascent and descent, then your average heart rate and max heart rates. Next up, your training status screen, and this gives you an assessment of how you're training. It uses First Beat Technology's algorithm along with a lot of other major players in this space. That's a great choice by Casio to maximise your training effectiveness through data analysis. Then we're onto the notification screen, so you can access any messages that you might have set up to sync to the phone, for example WhatsApp. And we're back to the home screen. Okay, now I guess it's time to put it to the test, head out for a run and see how I get on. Okay, and we're off. Okay, run done, that one's under my belt, no major problems. Time to check out the data on the watch itself, take a look in the app, get a feel for it, and then probably get a few more runs under my belt and report back to you guys. So let's head into the app and take a look at some of the data. Here you can see a selection of the activities, and then when you click into an individual activity, you're presented with the map at the top and data fields as you'd expect beneath. On several of my activities, I also wore my Garmin Fenix 6. Taking a look at an individual activity and comparing it directly with Garmin Connect, you'll see there was less than 0.1 of a mile difference here. That's actually the biggest difference that I measured on any runs. Usually it was within 1/100th of a mile or so. So pretty good on a GPS accuracy perspective. You see all of the usual stats that you'd expect to see in the Casio screen actually laid out really nicely all in one place. If you scroll down in the Casio app, the next thing you'll see is how much time you spent in each of the 5 heart rate zones, together with your figures for min, max and average heart rate. Now this for me is where the Casio came unstuck. In this particular activity you'll see it measured 6 beats high compared to my Garmin where I was wearing my chest strap for the average heart rate and 12 beats too high for the maximum reading. Actually that was one of the better runs, and on my other runs it was more wildly out and it was consistently from 10 to 15 beats too high throughout my runs. If you keep scrolling, you'll then see the training effect figures, which both come up really high on the Casio because of how much higher the heart rate was reading. Then you'll see your pace, heart rate and elevation change graphs at the bottom before having the chance to click into your laps, where you'll get to see your lap split time as well as your average heart rate and pace for those laps. You'll notice that I did set my watch up slightly wrong here, so it was recording a distance of 1.6 miles for every auto lap instead of 1.6 kilometers. Also, just a quick note that there's also a web app that you can log into on desktop. Broadly, it shows you the same things as the phone app that we just looked at, but this is where you have the opportunity to link your Casio account with an external app like Strava and Google Fit. So I've done quite a few runs in it now, and I still haven't really got used to the sheer size of it and the weight and sort of how heavy it feels on. Because the strap is quite stiff as well, it's not particularly forgiving, and I do have very small bony wrists. So having spent several weeks with it, quite a few different runs, there's definitely some things to report back on in terms of real world use. So first up for me, I kind of already pointed out a few times, is just the size and the impact that that has on the fit for me with smaller wrists. It's a big watch, there's no getting away from it. It's over 2 centimeters thick, which is pretty big by anyone's standards. And also because the strap isn't particularly forgiving and it's also not hinged where it meets the watch itself, that does make a difference to fit on smaller wrists, and fit is pretty important for the accuracy of heart rate readings. Accuracy of the heart rate monitor is something really important to talk about, and it's something that I've struggled with. So I've worn it on both wrists and I've tried it in different positions on my wrist, but in comparison to a chest strap, which I've been wearing on all my runs, I'd say that it's consistently inconsistent. It's been reading sometimes 10 to 15 beats too high, which obviously has an impact on the maximum figures of heart rate and the average heart rate recorded at the end of the run, and makes it quite difficult to use it as a true training tool to get the best out of the analysis that the watch and the app have to offer. We keep talking about size, but at the other end of the spectrum, the screen for a really big watch is pretty small. The actual screen real estate that's dedicated in this big chassis isn't what you'd expect probably, and I would have thought they could have made a little bit more room. And for those of you that are familiar with Casio's displays on their G-Shock and other watches, they do cram quite a bit of information in there, which is good. And I didn't have any problem reading the key metrics when I was out on a run, but it's definitely worth bearing in mind that it can look a little bit more cluttered and there's a fair bit less customization than you might find on some other watches. So I do like to use my smartwatches with the notifications turned on, mainly for when I get a text message to see who it's from. And that works pretty well. A notification comes up on the screen, it vibrates, you can see who the message is from, but all 5 buttons on the watch then dismiss those notifications. There's no way of going straight to them. Once you've dismissed them, you then have to navigate through the menu system to find the notifications and then read them, which could be a little bit frustrating. So let's talk about battery life. And I've got really great news on this. I've been really impressed. In fact, I've been using the watch in its default settings, which mean that heart rate is turned off most of the time, but it's turned on whenever I go for a run. I've done 6 or 7 runs over a 4-week period whilst I've been using the watch, and I've had smart notifications on that whole time. And the watch still has over 80% of charge left, and I haven't charged it at all from a USB perspective. So essentially all of that battery life has come from being outside in the sunshine and potentially the fluorescent lights of being in the house. Ultimately, price is going to be a really important factor as well. This watch is £379 or $399 in the US. And for that kind of money, you can get some pretty accomplished multi-sport watches that do have more features than this watch. So ultimately, it's going to come down to whether the battery life, along with the G-Shock branding and that heritage and that styling that comes along with it, whether that's going to be enough to sway you to invest. Those are all of the things that I wanted to talk about in depth. But now I want to run through some really quick answers to some common questions that I know you guys have whenever we talk about watches on the running channel. The first of those is it a multi-sport watch? Simple answer here, no. There's a dedicated run button on the side, and running is the only profile that you can set up within the app or the watch. Then, can you use it on a treadmill, so can you use it indoors? And the answer is yes. There's a 3-axis accelerometer which allows you to measure distance on a treadmill when you don't have a GPS signal. The same feature also allows you to use the auto run feature, which means if you forget to hit the run button at the start of an activity, it will still capture your activity using the accelerometer to measure distance. Next up is music. Can you use it for music on your runs? And the answer is no, there's no capacity for that here. So if that's something that's really important to you, do bear that in mind. And the final thing to talk about is how long does it take to acquire a GPS signal at the start of an activity? And the answer to that is quite a long time. Quite a bit longer than the Garmin and the Coros watches that I've tested recently. Well over a minute, often up to around 2 minutes, which seems like quite a long time. So that's my take on the Casio G-Shock Move GBD-H1000. Let us know what you think in the comments below, as well as if there's any particular watches that you swear by, or if you're in the market for a new one, ask us any questions and we'll do our best to get back to you. Whilst you're there, please do like this video if you found it useful and hit subscribe to support us in what we're trying to do on the running channel, and we'll see you next time.